The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as Maya-chan adjusted her camouflage uniform. At 25, she had already earned respect among her fellow soldiers for her quick thinking and unwavering determination. Today marked the final day of advanced combat training, where new recruits would be tested by none other than General Rodriguez, a man known throughout the base for his tough approach and old-school military methods. Maya had heard countless stories about the general. Some soldiers spoke of his fairness, while others whispered about his harsh treatment of female recruits. She had worked twice as hard as anyone else to prove herself worthy of being in this elite program, spending extra hours in the gym and studying military strategy until her eyes burned from exhaustion. The training ground buzzed with nervous energy as 50 recruits lined up in perfect formation. General Rodriguez emerged from the command building, his boots clicking against the concrete with military precision. His weathered face showed no emotion as he surveyed the group before him. At 58, he had served in 3 different conflicts and believed that only the strongest deserved to wear the uniform. "Today, you will face the ultimate test," the general announced, his voice carrying across the silent field. "This is not about following orders blindly. This is about proving you have what it takes to protect your country when everything goes wrong." Maya stood at attention, her heart racing with anticipation. She had trained for this moment for months. Her father, a former Marine, had taught her that respect was earned through actions, not given because of rank. Her mother, a nurse who had served in field hospitals, had shown her that strength came in many forms. The general began walking down the line, stopping occasionally to inspect a recruit's uniform or posture. When he reached Maya, his eyes narrowed slightly. She could feel his disapproval even before he spoke. In his experience, women belonged in support roles, not on the front lines where real soldiers fought. "State your name and hometown, recruit," he commanded. "Maya-chan, sir." "Born and raised in Seattle, Washington," she replied without wavering. The general studied her for a long moment, noting her confident stance and steady gaze. Something about her reminded him of soldiers who had challenged his authority before, and he did not appreciate being questioned, even silently. He had developed his training methods over decades, and they had produced some of the finest soldiers in the military. "We shall see if you have what it takes." "Chun," he said before moving on to the next recruit. The first series of tests began with obstacle courses designed to push physical limits. Maya excelled at each challenge, completing the rope climb in record time and navigating the mud crawl without hesitation. Other recruits struggled, but she maintained her pace throughout the grueling morning session. As the afternoon approached, the general announced the final challenge. Each recruit would face a simulated combat scenario where they had to rescue a wounded comrade while under enemy fire. The exercise required not just physical strength but tactical thinking and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Maya watched as recruit after recruit attempted the challenge. Some succeeded, others failed spectacularly, but all left the exercise with muddy uniforms and exhausted expressions. When her turn arrived, she approached the starting line with confidence built from months of preparation. The scenario began with simulated gunfire echoing across the training ground. Maya had to navigate through a series of barriers while carrying a 100-pound dummy representing a wounded soldier. The general observed from a raised platform, making notes on his clipboard as she moved through the course with impressive speed and efficiency. Halfway through the exercise, Maya encountered an unexpected obstacle. A section of the course had been modified to include a water-filled trench that was deeper than anticipated. Without hesitation, she adjusted her strategy. Finding a way to cross while keeping the dummy dry and secure, the general watched with growing irritation. As Maya completed each section of the course flawlessly, her performance was undeniably excellent, but it challenged his preconceived notions about women in combat roles. He had expected her to struggle, to prove his point about the differences between male and female soldiers. As Maya approached the final checkpoint, she was ahead of the time set by the previous best performer, a male recruit who had completed the course just an hour earlier. The general realized that she was about to set a new record, something that would be difficult to ignore or dismiss. In that moment, General Rodriguez made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He grabbed a bucket of muddy water that had been used earlier for equipment cleaning and positioned himself near the finish line. As Maya crossed into the final zone, breathing heavily but triumphant, he stepped forward. "Congratulations, recruit," he said with a cold smile. "But let me show you what real combat feels like." Without warning, he lifted the bucket and dumped the entire contents over Maya's head. The muddy water soaked through her uniform and dripped from her hair as shocked silence fell over the entire training ground. Every recruit, instructor, and observer stood frozen, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Maya stood motionless for several seconds, water still dripping from her uniform. The general expected her to break down, to cry, or to storm off in anger, proving his point about women being too emotional for military service. Instead, something else happened entirely. Maya wiped the muddy water from her eyes, her vision clearing to reveal the shocked faces surrounding her. The training ground had fallen completely silent except for the gentle dripping of water from her soaked uniform. General Rodriguez stood before her with his arms crossed, waiting for her reaction with the confidence of a man who believed he had just taught an important lesson. The other recruits exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to look away or continue watching. Some had their phones out, though regulations strictly prohibited recording during training exercises. The instructor stood motionless, equally surprised by the general's unprecedented action. Maya's mind raced through her options in the span of a heartbeat. Years of martial arts training had taught her to assess situations quickly and respond with precision. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, reminding her that sometimes the most powerful response was the one nobody expected. "Sir," Maya said calmly, maintaining perfect military posture despite being drenched, "is this part of the training exercise?" General Rodriguez was taken aback by her composed response. He had expected anger, tears, or resignation. Instead, she stood before him with the same confidence she had displayed throughout the entire day. His jaw tightened as he realized his attempt to humiliate her had failed to achieve the desired effect. "This is a lesson about respect and knowing your place," he replied harshly. "In real combat, the enemy will not show you mercy because of your gender." Maya nodded slowly, as if considering his words carefully. The crowd watched in fascination as she took a small step closer to the general. Her movement was so subtle that most observers barely noticed, but those with military training recognized the shift in her stance. "With respect?" "Sir," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent field, "I believe you have confused respect with fear." The general's face flushed red with anger. No recruit had ever spoken to him in such a manner, especially not a woman who had just been publicly humiliated. He raised his hand, pointing an accusing finger at her face. "How dare you question my methods, recruit? I have been training soldiers since before you were born." Maya remained perfectly still, her dark eyes locked on his. Every person watching could feel the tension building between them like electricity in the air before a thunderstorm. She had spent months preparing not just her body, but her mind for moments exactly like this one. "General Rodriguez," she said with quiet authority, "you have demonstrated that you believe humiliation is an effective training tool. Allow me to demonstrate a different approach." Before anyone could react, Maya moved with lightning speed. Her right hand shot forward in a perfectly executed palm strike, connecting with the center of the general's chest. The technique was precise and controlled, designed to wind rather than seriously injure, but delivered with enough force to send a clear message. General Rodriguez staggered backward, his breath escaping in a sharp gasp. The bucket fell from his hands, clattering against the concrete as he struggled to regain his composure. His eyes widened in shock and disbelief as he realized what had just happened. The training ground erupted in chaos. Some recruits cheered while others gasped in horror. Instructors rushed forward, unsure whether to restrain Maya or attend to the general. Camera phones appeared despite regulations, capturing the moment that would soon spread far beyond the military base. "Maya," maintained her fighting stance for exactly 3 seconds before returning to attention. Her expression remained calm and professional, showing no sign of the adrenaline coursing through her system. She had calculated the strike perfectly, delivering enough force to make her point without causing lasting damage. "Sir," she said clearly, "that was a demonstration of controlled force under pressure. In real combat, precision matters more than humiliation." General Rodriguez straightened his uniform, his pride wounded far more severely than his body. Never in his military career had a recruit laid hands on him, and certainly not with such devastating effectiveness. The implications of what had just occurred began to sink in as he noticed the phones recording every moment. "You just assaulted a superior officer," he shouted, though his voice lacked its earlier authority. "That is a court-martial offense." Maya nodded respectfully. "Yes, sir. And you just committed an act of harassment against a subordinate. I believe we both have some explaining to do." The crowd of observers grew larger as word spread throughout the base. Soldiers who had been in other training areas came running to see what had caused the commotion. Maya stood perfectly still in the center of it all, like the eye of a storm that was about to change everything. Major Williams, the base's second-in-command, pushed through the crowd with several military police officers behind him. He had been watching the training exercises from his office window when he saw the bucket incident unfold. The sight of the general dumping water on a recruit had prompted him to investigate immediately. "What is the meaning of this disturbance?" Major Williams demanded, though his tone suggested he already understood the situation. General Rodriguez pointed at Maya with a shaking hand. "This recruit attacked me without provocation. I demand she be arrested immediately." Major Williams looked between the soaked Maya and the disheveled general, noting the bucket on the ground and the crowd of witnesses with their phones out. He had served under General Rodriguez for 2 years and had heard whispers about his treatment of female soldiers, but had never witnessed it directly. "General Rodriguez," Major Williams said carefully, "perhaps we should discuss this matter in private. Maya-chan, you will report to my office in 1 hour for debriefing." As the crowd began to disperse, Maya remained at attention until dismissed. She walked toward the barracks with her head held high, leaving wet footprints on the concrete. Behind her, she could hear the general arguing with Major Williams, his voice growing more defensive with each word. The other recruits followed at a distance, whispering among themselves about what they had witnessed. Maya had done something that seemed impossible just minutes earlier. She had stood up to the most feared officer on the base and emerged victorious, at least for the moment, but Maya knew this was only the beginning. The real battle would be fought in conference rooms and hearing chambers, where her character and motivations would be examined under a microscope. She had 1 hour to prepare for the fight of her military career. Maya sat in the small waiting area outside Major Williams' office, her uniform now dry but still bearing water stains from the incident. She had used the past hour to shower, change into a clean uniform, and mentally prepare for what she knew would be the most important conversation of her military career. The hallway buzzed with activity as news of the confrontation spread throughout the base, through the office door. She could hear raised voices as General Rodriguez argued his case to Major Williams and Colonel Martinez, the base commander who had been called in to handle the situation. Maya knew that her future hung in the balance of their discussion, but she felt surprisingly calm about the entire situation. The door opened, and Major Williams emerged with a serious expression. He was a fair man in his early 40s who had earned respect through competence rather than intimidation. Unlike General Rodriguez, he believed in leading by example rather than through fear. "Maya-chan? Please come in," he said formally. Maya entered the office to find Colonel Martinez seated behind the desk, while General Rodriguez stood near the window with his arms crossed. The tension in the room was immediate and overwhelming. Colonel Martinez was known throughout the military for her no-nonsense approach to leadership and her commitment to fairness. "Recruit Chun," Colonel Martinez began, "you stand accused of assaulting a superior officer. This is an extremely serious charge that could result in dishonorable discharge and criminal prosecution." Do you understand the gravity of your situation? Yes, ma'am, Maya replied, maintaining perfect posture. I fully understand the charges against me. General Rodriguez turned from the window, his face still flushed with anger and embarrassment. She attacked me without warning after I conducted a routine training exercise. This recruit clearly lacks the discipline required for military service. Colonel Martinez raised her hand to silence him before turning back to Maya. Before we proceed with formal charges, I want to hear your version of events. Speak freely and honestly. Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine everything. She had spent the past hour considering how to present her case, but ultimately decided that simple honesty would serve her best. Ma'am. General Rodriguez dumped a bucket of muddy water over my head immediately after I completed the final training exercise. When I asked if this was part of the training, he stated it was a lesson about respect and knowing my place. I responded with controlled force to defend my dignity and demonstrate proper military bearing under pressure. Controlled force? General Rodriguez scoffed. You struck a superior officer. Yes, sir, I did, Maya admitted without hesitation. I used a palm strike designed to wind rather than injure. The technique was precise and proportional to the situation. Colonel Martinez leaned forward, studying Maya with keen interest. She had reviewed Maya's training records before this meeting, and had been impressed by her consistent performance and leadership potential. The incident with General Rodriguez raised questions that went beyond simple insubordination. Recruit Chen, why did you feel it was necessary to respond with force rather than filing a formal complaint through proper channels? Maya considered the question carefully before answering. Ma'am, in that moment, General Rodriguez's actions constituted harassment and an abuse of power. Waiting to file a complaint would have allowed him to continue such behavior with other soldiers. I believed immediate action was necessary to establish that such conduct would not be tolerated. Harassment? General Rodriguez exploded. I was conducting legitimate training designed to prepare soldiers for the realities of combat. Major Williams, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. General, can you explain why dumping muddy water on a recruit who had just successfully completed the exercise serves any legitimate training purpose? The question hung in the air as General Rodriguez struggled to provide a satisfactory answer. His training methods had never been questioned so directly before, and he found himself unable to articulate a convincing justification for his actions. Military training has always been tough, he said defensively. Soldiers need to learn that combat is not fair or comfortable. Colonel Martinez pulled up Maya's training records on her computer screen. According to these reports, Recruit Chen has exceeded expectations in every category of training. Her performance today set a new course record. What specific deficiency were you attempting to address with your intervention? General Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, realizing that his position was becoming increasingly difficult to defend. The truth was that Maya's exceptional performance had threatened his preconceived notions about women in combat roles. But he could not admit this without revealing his bias. Sometimes soldiers perform well in training but fail under real pressure, he said weakly. And you believe that dumping water on her would simulate real combat pressure? Major Williams asked skeptically, before General Rodriguez could answer. Colonel Martinez's assistant knocked on the door. Ma'am, I have several witnesses who have requested to speak with you regarding today's incident. Send them in, Colonel Martinez ordered. 3 soldiers entered the office, including Sergeant Jackson, a respected instructor who had been observing the training exercise. They stood at attention until Colonel Martinez instructed them to speak freely. Ma'am, Sergeant Jackson began, I witnessed the entire incident from beginning to end. Recruit Chen's performance throughout the day was exemplary. The general's action appeared to be unprovoked and inappropriate. I have never seen such behavior during a training exercise in my 12 years of service. The other witnesses corroborated Sergeant Jackson's account, providing additional details about Maya's professionalism and the general's apparent hostility toward her throughout the day. Their testimony painted a clear picture of harassment rather than legitimate training. Colonel Martinez listened carefully to each witness before dismissing them. The room fell silent as she considered all the information presented to her. Maya remained at attention, knowing that her military career hung in the balance of the colonel's decision. "General Rodriguez," Colonel Martinez said finally, "your actions today were inappropriate and constitute harassment of a subordinate. While Recruit Chun's physical response was technically an assault on a superior officer, the circumstances clearly show it was provoked by your unprofessional behavior." General Rodriguez's face went pale as he realized the implications of the colonel's words. His career, which had spanned 3 decades, was suddenly in jeopardy because of his treatment of one recruit. However, Colonel Martinez continued, turning to Maya, "Military discipline requires that we address your actions as well. While I understand your motivations, striking a superior officer cannot be overlooked entirely." Maya nodded, accepting that some consequences were inevitable. She had known from the moment she decided to act that there would be repercussions, but she believed her choice was justified nonetheless. The colonel leaned back in her chair, weighing options that would serve justice while maintaining military order. The decision she was about to make would send a message throughout the entire base about acceptable behavior and the proper response to abuse of power. Colonel Martinez spent the next 3 days conducting a thorough investigation into the incident. What began as a simple case of insubordination had evolved into something much larger as more witnesses came forward with their own stories about General Rodriguez's behavior. Maya found herself at the center of a controversy that was spreading far beyond the military base. During those 3 days, Maya continued her regular duties while awaiting the colonel's decision. Other recruits treated her with a mixture of admiration and concern, unsure whether she would be celebrated as a hero or court-martialed as an example. The atmosphere on the base had shifted noticeably, with many soldiers questioning training methods they had previously accepted without thought. Captain Sarah Thompson, a military lawyer assigned to review the case, interviewed Maya extensively about her background and motivations. She discovered that Maya held a black belt in karate and had studied conflict resolution in college, facts that became crucial to understanding her measured response to the general's provocation. "Your martial arts training emphasizes controlled response to aggression?" Captain Thompson noted during one interview. "Is that why you chose a palm strike rather than a more damaging technique?" Maya nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The situation required immediate action to establish boundaries, but I had no desire to seriously injure General Rodriguez. My goal was to demonstrate that his behavior was unacceptable, not to harm him." Meanwhile, General Rodriguez found himself increasingly isolated as the investigation revealed a pattern of inappropriate behavior toward female soldiers. Former recruits contacted the base after hearing about the incident, sharing their own experiences of harassment and intimidation. What had seemed like tough but acceptable training methods were now being re-examined in light of these testimonies. The general spent hours in meetings with military lawyers, trying to defend decades of training methods that had suddenly come under scrutiny. His supporters pointed to his successful record of producing combat-ready soldiers, while his critics argued that success never justified harassment or discrimination. On Thursday morning, Colonel Martinez called all parties back to her office for the final determination. The room felt different this time, charged with anticipation as everyone understood that this decision would have lasting consequences for military culture on the base. After extensive investigation and careful consideration, Colonel Martinez began, "I have reached my conclusions regarding the events of Monday afternoon." Maya stood at perfect attention, her face revealing nothing of the anxiety she felt inside. General Rodriguez sat rigidly in his chair, his usual confidence replaced by obvious concern about his future. "General Rodriguez, your actions constituted harassment and an abuse of power. Dumping water on Recruit Chun served no legitimate training purpose and was clearly intended to humiliate rather than educate. Such behavior is unbecoming of an officer and violates our standards of professional conduct." The general's jaw tightened, but he remained silent as the colonel continued. "Furthermore, The investigation has revealed a pattern of similar behavior toward female soldiers under your command. This pattern suggests a systematic bias that has no place in our modern military." Colonel Martinez turned to Maya, her expression softening slightly. "Recruit Chien, while your response was technically an assault on a superior officer, the circumstances clearly show it was provoked by unprofessional behavior. Your measured response demonstrated remarkable self-control and military bearing under extreme provocation." The room held its breath as the colonel announced her decisions. "General Rodriguez, you are hereby relieved of your training duties pending a full review by military command. You will report to desk duty while consideration is given to appropriate disciplinary action, which may include forced retirement or reduction in rank." General Rodriguez's face went ashen as the full impact of the decision hit him. His career, which had defined his entire adult life, was effectively over. Decades of service were being overshadowed by his treatment of one recruit who had refused to accept his abuse. "Recruit Chun," the colonel continued, "given the exceptional circumstances and your exemplary record, you will receive a formal reprimand for striking a superior officer, but you will continue with your training. Additionally, you are promoted to squad leader in recognition of your leadership qualities and moral courage." Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, though she was careful not to show any emotion. The promotion was unexpected, but she understood it as recognition that sometimes standing up for what was right required accepting personal risk. "However," Colonel Martinez added, "this incident raises important questions about our training culture that extend beyond this particular case. Major Williams, you will form a committee to review all training protocols and ensure they meet our highest standards of professionalism." As the meeting concluded, General Rodriguez stood slowly and walked toward the door without making eye contact with anyone. His departure marked the end of an era on the base, where fear had been mistaken for respect and humiliation had been confused with toughness. Maya remained behind as the others left, and Colonel Martinez approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Recruit Chen, what you did was risky and could have destroyed your career. Why did you feel it was worth taking such a chance?" Maya considered the question carefully before responding. "Ma'am, my father taught me that sometimes the right choice is not the easy choice. If I had remained silent, General Rodriguez would have continued treating other soldiers the same way. I believe we have a duty to protect each other, even from our own leadership when necessary." Colonel Martinez nodded approvingly. "That kind of moral courage is exactly what we need in our future leaders. Your actions have sparked important conversations about how we train our soldiers and what standards we accept from our officers." As Maya left the colonel's office, she was surprised to find a group of soldiers waiting in the hallway. Led by Sergeant Jackson, they had come to show their support for her courage in standing up to inappropriate authority. "Chun," Sergeant Jackson said with a smile, "you did something that needed doing. A lot of us have wanted to say something about the general's methods for years, but we never had the courage." The group accompanied Maya back to the training ground, where her fellow recruits were waiting to continue their exercises. The atmosphere was different now, charged with a sense of possibility and renewed purpose. Maya had shown them that military discipline did not require accepting abuse, and that true strength sometimes meant standing up to those in power, but Maya knew that her actions had consequences beyond the immediate resolution. Word of the incident was already spreading to other military bases, and she would likely face challenges from those who viewed her actions as insubordination regardless of the circumstances. Word of Maya's confrontation with General Rodriguez spread throughout the military faster than anyone anticipated. Within a week, videos of the incident had been shared across social media platforms, despite attempts to keep them contained within military channels. Maya found herself at the center of a national conversation about military culture, harassment, and the proper response to abuse of power. Major news outlets picked up the story. Though they were careful to protect Maya's identity while she remained in training, the incident became a lightning rod for discussions about women in combat roles and the outdated attitudes that still persisted in some military circles. Military reform advocates held up Maya as an example of the new generation of soldiers who would not tolerate harassment. Maya tried to focus on her training while the media storm swirled around her, but it was impossible to ignore the impact her actions were having beyond the base. She received hundreds of messages from current and former military personnel sharing their own experiences with inappropriate behavior from superior officers. Colonel Martinez called Maya to her office on a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after the incident. This time, the meeting was less formal, with the colonel inviting Maya to sit across from her desk rather than standing at attention. Maya, I want you to know that your actions have triggered reviews at 7 other military installations. The Army Inspector General has opened formal investigations into training practices based on your case. Colonel Martinez explained. Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had acted in the moment to defend herself, but her choice had unleashed forces far beyond her control or intention. Ma'am, I never intended for this to become such a large issue. I was simply responding to an immediate situation. Colonel Martinez smiled. The best agents of change rarely intend to change the world, Maya. They simply refuse to accept what they know is wrong. Your refusal to be humiliated has given voice to countless soldiers who have suffered in silence. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Major Williams entered with a serious expression, carrying a folder marked with official seals. Colonel Martinez, I have orders from Pentagon regarding the Chun case, he announced. Maya's heart raced as she wondered if higher military command had decided to reverse the colonel's decision and pursue court-martial charges against her. The Pentagon's involvement suggested that her case had reached the highest levels of military leadership. Colonel Martinez opened the folder and read its contents carefully, her expression revealing nothing. After several minutes that felt like hours to Maya, she looked up with a slight smile. Maya Chun, you are hereby ordered to report to Washington, D.C. next month to testify before the Senate Subcommittee on Military Personnel. Your testimony will be part of hearings on military training reform and anti-harassment policies. Maya felt dizzy as the implications of this news sank in. She would be testifying before Congress about her experiences, speaking directly to the senators responsible for military oversight. Her actions had resonated all the way to the highest levels of government. Additionally, Colonel Martinez continued reading, you have been selected for accelerated promotion track based on your demonstrated leadership and moral courage. Upon completion of your current training, you will be fast-tracked for officer candidate school. The news was overwhelming. 6 months ago, Maya had been a civilian working at a Seattle coffee shop while considering her future. Now she was being invited to shape military policy at the national level and being groomed for military leadership. Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm prepared for such responsibility, Maya admitted honestly. Major Williams stepped forward. Maya, leadership is not about feeling prepared. It's about stepping up when the situation demands it, which is exactly what you did when General Rodriguez humiliated you. Over the following weeks, Maya prepared for her testimony while continuing her training duties. Military lawyers helped her understand the legal implications of her case, while communications specialists taught her how to present her experiences effectively to congressional leaders. General Rodriguez, meanwhile, had been transferred to a desk position at a different base while his case was reviewed. Several former soldiers had come forward with formal complaints about his behavior, painting a picture of systematic harassment that had gone unchecked for years. His forced retirement seemed inevitable as the investigation revealed the full scope of his inappropriate conduct. The night before leaving for Washington, Maya received an unexpected visitor. Sergeant Jackson knocked on her barracks door carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you today," he said with a knowing smile. Inside the package, Maya found a handwritten letter from her father along with a small American flag that had been flown over a military cemetery. The letter was brief but powerful. "Maya, your mother and I always knew you would make a difference in this world. We taught you to stand up for what is right even when it was difficult. Today you are standing up not just for yourself but for every soldier who deserves to serve with dignity. We are proud beyond words. Use your voice to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. As Maya packed for her trip to Washington, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in such a short time. The scared young woman who had dumped muddy water over her head had been transformed into a national advocate for military reform, but she still felt like the same person who simply refused to accept mistreatment. Her fellow recruits gathered to see her off the next morning, many of them expressing gratitude for her courage in challenging an unfair system. Maya realized that her actions had given them permission to expect better treatment and to speak up when they witnessed inappropriate behavior. The bus ride to the airport gave Maya time to think about the testimony she would deliver to Congress. She had decided to speak honestly about her experiences while emphasizing the positive changes that could result from reform. Her goal was not to condemn the military, but to help it live up to its highest ideals. As the plane lifted off toward Washington, Maya looked down at the military base that had become her second home. Somewhere below, new recruits were beginning their training under improved protocols that prioritized respect alongside toughness. Her confrontation with General Rodriguez had planted seeds of change that were already beginning to grow. Throughout the military system, Maya understood that her appearance before Congress was just the beginning of a longer journey toward comprehensive military reform. She was ready to accept the responsibility that had been thrust upon her, knowing that her voice could help create a better environment for future generations of soldiers. The Senate hearing room was packed with military officials, journalists, and advocates as Maya entered wearing her dress uniform with the new squad leader stripes prominently displayed. 6 months had passed since her confrontation with General Rodriguez, and the ripple effects of that moment continued to transform military culture across the country. Senator Patricia Williams, chairwoman of the Military Personnel Subcommittee, called the hearing to order as cameras captured every moment for national broadcast. Maya took her seat at the witness table, feeling the weight of thousands of current and former military personnel who were counting on her testimony to create lasting change. Sergeant Chun, Senator Williams began, using Maya's new rank, your actions at Fort Manning have sparked the most comprehensive review of military training practices in decades. Please tell us, in your own words, what happened that day and why you felt compelled to respond as you did. Maya had rehearsed her testimony countless times, but speaking before Congress felt different from any preparation. She thought of her father watching from Seattle, of her fellow soldiers back at the base, and of all the service members who had shared their stories with her over the past months. Senator Williams, on that day I completed what should have been the proudest moment of my military training. I had set a new course record and demonstrated everything the military had taught me about excellence under pressure. Instead of recognition, I was subjected to deliberate humiliation designed to break my spirit rather than build my character. The room remained silent as Maya described the bucket incident and her decision to respond with controlled force. Her voice remained steady as she explained the martial arts principles that had guided her measured response. I struck General Rodriguez not in anger, but as a demonstration that dignity cannot be taken from someone who refuses to surrender it. My response was calculated to establish boundaries without causing permanent harm. Senator Robert Hayes, known for his traditional views on military discipline, leaned forward. Sergeant Chun, some critics argue that your actions undermine military hierarchy and could encourage other soldiers to attack their superiors. How do you respond to these concerns? Maya had anticipated this question and answered with confidence. Senator Hayes, true military discipline is built on mutual respect and shared commitment to our mission. Fear-based leadership creates soldiers who follow orders without thinking, while respect-based leadership creates soldiers who understand why those orders matter. She paused before continuing. My action was not an attack on military hierarchy, but a defense of the principles that hierarchy should protect. A leader who uses his position to humiliate subordinates has already broken the sacred trust that makes military discipline possible. The hearing continued for 3 hours as Maya answered questions about her background, her training, and her vision for military reform. She spoke about the need for clear policies against harassment, better training for military leaders, and systems that protect soldiers who report inappropriate behavior. General Patricia Morrison, the Army's highest-ranking female officer, testified after Maya about the systemic changes that had been implemented based on the investigation sparked by her case. Training protocols had been revised at installations across the country, and new oversight mechanisms ensured that abusive behavior would be quickly identified and addressed. Sergeant Chun's courage has accelerated reforms that were already needed, General Morrison explained. Her actions demonstrated that our newest soldiers possess the moral clarity and leadership potential we need in our future officers. As the hearing concluded, Senator Williams announced that Congress would be passing the Military Dignity Act, legislation requiring comprehensive anti-harassment training and establishing independent review boards for training practices. Maya realized that her split-second decision to defend herself had helped create lasting institutional change outside the Capitol building. Maya was surrounded by reporters asking about her future plans and her thoughts on becoming a symbol of military reform. She answered their questions politely but briefly, emphasizing that real change would come from the collective efforts of military leaders committed to creating a better culture. That evening, Maya attended a reception hosted by military advocacy groups where she met dozens of service members whose lives had been impacted by harassment and discrimination. Many thanked her for giving them hope that their experiences mattered and that change was possible. Colonel Sarah Peterson, who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, approached Maya with tears in her eyes. 20 years ago, I was subjected to treatment similar to what you experienced, but I stayed silent because I thought it was the price of serving. You've shown a generation of female soldiers that they don't have to accept abuse to prove their worth. Maya was moved by these conversations, but also humbled by the responsibility they represented. She understood that her actions had created expectations for continued leadership in military reform efforts. 2 weeks later, Maya returned to Fort Manning to complete her training before beginning officer candidate school. The base felt different now, with new policies clearly posted in every building and training exercises, conducted with obvious attention to respect and professionalism. General Rodriguez had been forced into early retirement after additional investigations revealed the full extent of his inappropriate behavior. His replacement, Colonel James Mitchell, had implemented training programs focused on building soldiers up rather than tearing them down. Maya's fellow recruits welcomed her back as a hero, but she was more interested in completing her training than basking in celebrity. She had learned that sustainable change required consistent, daily choices rather than single dramatic gestures. On her final day of basic training, Maya stood before the same obstacle course where her confrontation with General Rodriguez had occurred. This time, new recruits were completing the exercise under the supervision of instructors, who emphasized encouragement and constructive feedback. As she watched young soldiers push themselves to excel, without fear of arbitrary humiliation, Maya felt satisfied that her moment of courage had contributed to something larger than herself. The military would never be perfect, but it was becoming more aligned with the values it claimed to represent. Colonel Martinez approached her as the exercise concluded. Maya, you've shown us that sometimes the greatest act of loyalty to an institution is refusing to accept its flaws. Your example will influence military culture for generations. Maya saluted her commanding officer with pride, knowing that she had found her calling in military service. She had entered basic training hoping to prove herself worthy of wearing the uniform. Instead, she had helped prove that the uniform was worthy of the soldiers who wore it. As she prepared to begin the next phase of her military career, Maya carried with her the knowledge that true strength came not from the ability to endure abuse, but from the courage to demand better. Her journey from recruit to reformer had shown that one person's refusal to accept injustice could change an entire Institution. The young woman who had once served coffee in Seattle was now a sergeant in the United States Army, preparing to become an officer who would help lead the military into a more just and respectful future. Her story had become part of military history, inspiring countless others to stand up for what they believed was right, regardless of the personal cost.